Hello everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in today's video. We got a lot to talk about today. The reaction of Real Madrid's win at Celta Vigo and getting that win. We'll talk about Jude Bellingham. We'll talk about the whole team. We'll talk about the reaction of it. And then also we'll go ahead and talk about the Castilla as they ended up drawing at the De Stefano against Unión Deportiva Melilla. And also we'll go ahead and finish off with a European roundup. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, let's go ahead and just talk about the win away at Celta de Vigo. A tough stadium, although I got some cool stats about this match, but we'll speak about those in a little bit. But it's 3 points. That's 3-0 right now for Real Madrid. That's 3 away game wins for Real Madrid. And man, what a good start. Now we got to talk about this game, and this game wasn't the best game out of the 3 from Real Madrid. Just a poor start. Just so slow, not getting it, not the best first half from Real Madrid. At the end, do we come off with 3 points? I think yes. I think it was just to come out with the 3 points, although we had chances in the second half to really kind of take the game with, a bigger margin. But a 1-0 win helps a lot. It helps a lot just to understand that although we are thin in the attack, we can still pull off these goals. And, we got to talk about Jude Bellingham. I think to come out with 4 goals already in your first 3 matches is amazing. He is the 8th Real Madrid player to score 4 goals in his first 3 matches. He's in the company of names of Puskás, Wesley Sneijder, Rafael Randavart, and then Cristiano Ronaldo, right? For non-forwards in La Liga history, this has only happened 6 times. So that's pretty amazing. But yes, Jude Bellingham, I think, coming off with a great start, great campaign already for his debut season for Real Madrid. And, this kid will continue to kind of get more and more eyes upon him as he continues this season. Because, this is the best way to start. Great way to put yourself not only in the team, but also in the league. He's leading right now the Pichichi race with 4 goals. And he's not even a striker. He's not a forward. And that's what's amazing about this kid, is that even then, he's still a threat with this team. And so with that being said, if we kind of look at the game in the first half, even within the first minutes, it's sad to say that we see something that we really didn't see for quite some time, which was Vinny going down with a muscle injury. I have a little bit of set of criticism about what transpires after this moment. It is a play that he basically runs down on the left. He beats two defenders and gets into the 6-yard box, gets it into the 16-yard box, and finds Rodrigo. The play ends up not having much of a threat, but after that play, he just grabs his back of his hamstring and says that he fell. He even did the signal. You see in the broadcast. He's down, he's sitting down. The medical staff comes up to him, and he just does that signal. He felt something pull. Get him off to the sideline. And this is the frustrating thing, is when you know it's a muscle injury, why are you still on the field, right? Like, I get that the player wants to say that he's fine and he wants to go back in, and maybe it wasn't as bad. I get that the player wants to say that he's fine and he wants to go back in, and maybe it wasn't as bad. But as the medical staff, have a little sense of authority to say, no, man, sit out. It's okay. We don't want to make it worse. But they go and let him play for another 5 to 7 minutes, and he can't continue. He goes back down. They wrap his thigh, which wrapping doesn't do anything. This kind of injury, what we end up now knowing is a potential tear that he's going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks, right? What benefits us is that it's about 2 weeks that he'll be out. That won't really matter just because there's the FIFA dates. That he will be missing, obviously, with Brazil. Some criticism needs to be falling upon why players are allowed to have that sense of authority. I get it. Players can say, no, dude, I'm fine. I can get back on the field. But from the very beginning, when you went down the first time, you showed that you had something pulled, and it's a muscle injury. You need to get off the field, step off. Don't worry about it. The team will take care. Somebody will come in, and we'll see that Joselu actually is subbed in for Vinny. And the game wasn't the best because also Jude Bellingham didn't have a good first half. It was a very contentious. It just wasn't our best start in the first half. Celta Vigo had chances, which we'll talk about, because even in the first 3 minutes of the game, as I posted here a YouTube short, even in that play, Kepa having his debut match basically with Real Madrid at Celta, could have potentially gone down and has probably a bad start to the match, knowing that he conceded within 4 minutes of the match by a goal from Larson. But when you previously see the play, in which I believe that the VAR actually stepped in at the right time to see that Larson is actually holding on to Kepa's jersey as Kepa's trying to clear it out. The only frustration that I have in that specific play is that several people were ball watching. As Kepa punches the ball out of the box, out of the danger zone, a Celta player takes a shot. No one steps up to cover that shot, and everybody's watching, keeping Larson onside, and Larson just deflects that shot to find it in the back of the net. Once again, disallowed by VAR, rightfully so. And it just seemed like it wasn't going to be a great start. A tough place to play at. Celta celebrating the 100 years of their establishment as a club. And it just seemed that kind of night. The pitch wasn't great, and it just wasn't a great start. So in the first half, Celta had potentially their first chances to actually be on top before halftime. But in the second half, you start seeing the change. You start actually seeing Real Madrid grow into the game. Celta Vigo starts tapering off, and Real Madrid just take it on from there. More chances until we get into the 68th minute, where Rodrigo, rightfully so, picks up a penalty, right? A penalty that was rightly called, had to be reviewed by VAR, but rightly so. Now, this is the part that we start seeing a little bit of a side of Carlo Ancelotti that we have not seen. Really frustrated. You probably see it on Twitter and your timeline or wherever you see it, but Carlo Ancelotti being just ticked off by the decision of Rodrigo taking the penalty kick, because it is so that Rodrigo misses the shot. A good pace to that ball, but just not the right height. If he just aimed a little bit higher, it probably wouldn't have been reached by the goalkeeper. But honestly, credit to the goalkeeper. I think he made an amazing save. That would have been the chance to basically put Real Madrid in a comfortable lead, but still 0-0. And it wasn't until in basically almost with 10 minutes left into the game where a corner kick from Toni Kroos sends it in to find Joselu, who heads it back to where the far post where Jude Bellingham is at, and he heads it in to put Real Madrid on top 1-0 against Celta. And celebrated, phenomenal. I mean, now we know the trademark celebration of Jude Bellingham, and it's nice to see. So Jude Bellingham now picking up his 4th goal in 3 games of Real Madrid. I already told you the stats of what that means and where he stands in La Liga and in Real Madrid lore. Now, with Vinny's injury, and we mentioned already the potential time that he will be out, things that are circulating around and what Carlo has potentially expressed already is that he might be reverting back to the 4-3-3 now that Vinny is out. And the potential thing that I'm already kind of thinking what's going to happen is obviously Joselu will be starting as the 9. And if he is going with that 4-3-3, is that I think now he will just go ahead and shift Fede to go further up top on that right wing and put Rodrigo on the left wing. And so I kind of see that. I'm predicting that that's going to be the top 3. Is going to be a Rodrigo on the left, a Joselu as the 9, and Fede Valverde as the right wing. Now the midfield, I think Tchouaméni has to start, so he's going to be the CDM. And then you have the 2 that could potentially come in, which is more than likely Camavinga. And that would be nice to see a Jude Bellingham on that right side of the 3, but obviously can venture to help out to be as a 10. And then you can drop Camavinga and Tchouaméni as to be the double pivots. And potentially in that offensive transition of the game. I think the back line did a phenomenal job. Rudiger once again had a great game. You got to give shout-outs to Tchouaméni, even though he was subbed off. The shout-out to me, though, and has to get an honorable mention, was Fede Valverde's work rate in that match. Was phenomenal. I think he did a great job. He did the dirty work in a flashy way, but the man deserves all the credit for the work he had done in that match. Once again, now Kepa keeps a clean sheet. Will he start against Getafe? I think so. To be paying this guy this much, it just seems like he's going to be getting the number 1 spot, knowing that Courtois obviously is out for the season and Lunin will just be the backup. All right, and so also yesterday, Castilla has their first game of the season as they are back again with Raúl starting this campaign in the third division, as they had almost the opportunity until the final playoff match to get promoted to the second division, but unfortunately that didn't happen. And so they're back at it again in this new season with certain players from Juvenil being called up now to the Castilla, as that is Nico Paz is one of them. And I'm just excited. I was excited to see what the season will be for certain players, and so especially for Nico Paz. But yes, so when we're talking about the Castilla, they had their match against Unión Deportiva Melilla. It ended up being a draw, 2-2. And the thing that I wanted to keep an eye out was some of the offensive players in the Castilla. We're talking about Alvaro Rodriguez. We're talking about Nico Paz, as I mentioned. And then there's also Gonzalo. And this kid ended up having a phenomenal game. 2-2. He ended up getting the brace. Highly involved. We saw Nico Paz being part of that for those 2 goals for Gonzalo. And that's a player that I would say keep an eye out for. If you're kind of looking into what Real Madrid is doing in La Fábrica, look into Gonzalo Garcia Torres, and you'll see a great player that now, rumor has it, potentially, which I think even in the press post-match with Raúl, they even asked him, is there a possibility that Gonzalo will be called up to the first team? As Carlo Ancelotti is noticing that he's running thin in the attack. And Raúl just basically deflected and basically saying that's a question for Carlo. But for the player, he's in good form. He's doing great from what he did last season to this season, and it's translating really well. So if you're looking for a player to keep an eye out, a youngster, something with potential, look no further than the name one, if you haven't already, is Nico Paz, but also Gonzalo. But yeah, so not the start that they wanted. Obviously, you want to come off with the win at the Di Stefano, but with 1 point, that's fine. They find themselves in 10th place as the season has kick-started. And let's also talk about the Real Madrid Femenino. As the Women's World Cup has come to an end, obviously Spain lifting up the trophy for the very first time. A lot of Real Madrid players were featured in that Spain team. Some of these players are still, I think, traveling, are still trying to take advantage of their break. Some of them have now, obviously, they returned back to Spain, but, they're doing the little PR tour, as some of them now going back to maybe their hometown or to their first club where they played for to kind of just do those honorary presentations, as now they are, World Cup winners. But many of the players and the majority of the squad has now started their tour out in Mexico. I think yesterday they had their first training, if I'm correct. And a lot of players that were featured in the World Cup. And there are also including the new signings that Real Madrid have signed, like Signe Braun. We're also talking about Hayley Raso from Australia, and many more other players that have now basically returned back to the camp. And I'm just excited. I'm excited for them to start because their first game is going to be September 9th against Real Betis Femenino. And so that kind of does it for Real Madrid today. But also, we got to mention that Ferland Mendy and Denis Ceballos are back to practicing with the squad. And so it's going to be great to see some of these players back on the bench and ready to go. What does La Liga look like right now as Real Madrid with a perfect 3-0 start with all 9 points away are on top of the table with Girona beating Sevilla 1-0 and putting them actually in provisional second place. We'll also be talking about what happened in this game with Barcelona being hosted by Villarreal. And in this game, finishing a 4-3 in favor of Barcelona. Now, there's a little bit of controversy going on in this game with almost like the very start of the game, basically almost the same with Real Madrid against Celta Vigo, where a goal was disallowed by VAR. A very controversial call because this is a thing I have a frustration because, okay, listen, some Barca fans are going to come on here saying, oh man, Real Madrid and La Liga, it's always a, listen, let's stick with the facts. We're not the ones being investigated about referees and the president of referees and the vice president and making payments for I don't know how many years. We're not the club that's caught into that, right? So let's leave that to the side, but let's agree on something. We got to agree that right now, in the way the referees and VAR are operating in La Liga, it is subpar, both for our clubs and other clubs around. That right now, the works and the product that we're seeing right now in La Liga for the last, I say, 3 or 4 seasons, even since VAR was introduced, we have been seeing some bad officiating. and bad calls that have been affecting a lot of teams, right? Let it be winning the league title or relegation. And so we honestly, yes, we have the bias, we have our own camps, but in the common ground that we can find, it is about these referees and what's going on now. And what happened in that game, to see that was disallowed without the player even touching the ball, letting it go through him, but finding the player that potentially that pass was for and him finishing the goal would have put Villarreal up 1-0 in the first 5 minutes of the game, which could have set the different trajectory of the game. And so to see that was called, you would think that VAR would step in because they see something that would basically see that it is basically undeniably that this call has to be rectified or has to be disallowed, because there is no doubt that the evidence, the video evidence that we have can change this decision. It doesn't even touch him at all. He lets it just go through him because he understands that, hey, it wasn't intended for me. Now, was he offside? No. If you look at right before the pass, he is not offside. Marco Alonso keeps him onside, but because the play then is called that from Capu all the way up, going up there to meet the forward, was touched. But there's no video evidence for that. So it was really, really controversial. And man, you got to keep an eye out, because this is what they say, right? This is not football. This is La Liga. But an interesting game, a game that ended up going down to the wire. And there's a player that you got to notice. If it doesn't matter if you're a Real Madrid fan or not, but man, Yamal, that 16-year-old kid with 45 days, it's amazing. 46 now, I guess. So 16 years old with 46 days. Amazing kid. Looks like a good future. Although right now, with potential call-ups on Friday for Spain, there's that talk if this kid is going to go ahead and debut for the national team. But yeah, so Barca coming out with the 3 points there and putting them in provisional third place as well. Athletic Club coming out with the remontada against Real Betis. An Isco, obviously, that has been having a great start as well, as he's come back from football, being out almost like 9 months, almost missing out a whole year. But having a great start in Real Betis, but unfortunately not coming out with the win. Athletic Club coming off with the remontada 4-2. And then Sevilla down in relegation. But that's what you see in La Liga right now. But let's just go ahead and jump into the Premier League with Man City beating Sheffield United 2-1. A game that was really coming down to the wire, and what was happening with Haaland missing some chances, some opportunities, but he finds his goal, and so does Rodrigo to put them with the win against Sheffield United. You got West Ham getting out with the win against a really, really good Brighton. A Brighton team that, I predicted that was going to be top 4, but West Ham is actually there, doing the job, doing the work, although they had lost their key guy, which was Declan Rice. But man, they have found ways to kind of get going, and so finding themselves in second place. You got Spurs, Tottenham Hotspurs, running riot, I guess you could say, as they end up beating Bournemouth as well to keep them in third place. And then you got Liverpool coming back with 10 men, with Virgil van Dijk being sent off in the first half, and Liverpool down 1-0 against Newcastle away. And man, you see the timeline, you see the assistant coach shushing Jurgen Klopp, and then you see it at the end where Jurgen Klopp does the last one, as they end up coming off with the win in those 3 points with a late substitution of Darwin Núñez, and then he gets that brace to put Liverpool to win away with 10 men against Newcastle. Pretty good match. Arsenal dropping points against Fulham, 2-2. And let's go ahead and jump off to the Bundesliga, where you have Bayern Munich beating Augsburg 3-1. Harry Kane getting a brace. And then you're looking at Bayern Leverkusen, I think a team that I've been keeping an eye out for this season in the Bundesliga because of the managerial aspect of it, with Xabi Alonso doing just the Lord's work over there, beating Mönchengladbach 3-0. And then you also had Borussia Dortmund losing some points in what would be the Bochum and Dortmund derby, as these are 2 neighboring cities. These clubs are fairly close to each other. They ended up getting a draw, 1-1. And then when you look at Serie A, you look at AC Milan cruising on top of the table with a 4-1 win over Torino. And then you also got Napoli beating Sassuolo 2-0. Hellas Verona. Hello, Hellas Verona. They're beating Roma, a 2-1 game. That a player that I actually want to keep an eye out for is Ngonch. He's Belgian. Keep an eye out for him. He had a wonderful game against Roma. And then you got Juve dropping points against Bologna. Inter, I would say more, but right now they're just one game behind, in which I think it's going to be a game for today. But other than that, I mean, you look at the league, it's slowly starting. We already see who's getting on top, who's already kind of claiming a good start. But also the thing that you got to keep out, because this week would be the second leg for the Champions League qualifying rounds. And so you got several teams that are out there competing for this as they're trying to get themselves into the last spots of pot 4 when it comes down to the Champions League, because later this week we're having the UCL draw. Where do our teams will land? And hey, I ask you in the comments down below, where does your team end up in the Champions League? What pot are they in? And who's going to be in your group? Or what will be the group of death? How about that? It's going to be interesting. Even for Real Madrid, I mean, there's some top teams that, man, it's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening. Because we could find ourselves with a Bayern Munich, or we could find ourselves with a Man City. And so imagine that. That'd be pretty cool. Maybe I'll do a video, maybe doing a prediction and what ends up happening with that, and see what group and how we will look like as we start the campaign for the Champions League 2023-2024. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be great. So that does it for this video. Thank you so much for tuning in. Listen, we're so close to reaching 30 subscribers in this channel, and I got to say thank you so much. Thank you so much for supporting the videos. Thank you for supporting this channel. So I really, really appreciate it. That's it for me. You guys have a good one. Yeah, take care of yourselves. Yeah, be safe, and peace.